the obstacles that come up when we intend to practice. Because I'm assuming here that there's some kind of intention, kind of you wouldn't be here and you wouldn't be coming up with all of these obstacles. They wouldn't be obstacles if you didn't actually want to practice meditation. So there's something really excellent here. There's clearly a some kind of desire, some kind of wanting to make this happen. So first of all, we could acknowledge that, couldn't we? And go, oh, this is wonderful. I actually want to do it. Even if there's a part of us that doesn't want to do it, there's something deeper within which sees it as an obstacle or difficulty when meditation doesn't happen for some kind of reason. So that's excellent. Yeah, so we've already turned these obstacles into a recognition of our strengths and our desire for wellness or indeed for whatever values are supported by our practicing meditation. So maybe that's actually a first bit of sort of jujitsu we can do, is actually recognize that all of these obstacles are showing us our intentions for well-being. So they're not the enemy. So traditionally, there are a number of mind states that get in the way, such as being too excited or being too tired or being really restless, or getting really attached to doing something other than meditation, or an aversion to what's coming up in meditation. Of course, there are a number of environmental states as well that get in the way, and physical states. So all of these are well known in the kind of the meditation literature, if you like. The question is, what can we do with each of these once we've noticed them? And having seen them as not the problem, as actually as a reflection of our desire to practice, there's some sense of maybe normalizing them a little bit. So maybe we can let go of judging ourselves, and of judging the difficulty that we find in practicing, and treat all of these actually in some sense as our teacher. Because every obstacle is showing us something. If we're finding that we're falling asleep every time that we practice, that's showing us something. If we're finding that we don't want to be with ourselves, that's showing us something. It's showing us a quality that most likely shows up in our life as well. So if we have an aversion to experiencing our emotions, for example, in meditation, chances are that we also may well find ways of avoiding our emotions in life, whether that's by keeping busy or whether it's by some kind of suppression or rumination. So whatever's coming up, if we can be interested in the process of what is coming up, then once again, we're turning what seems to be an obstacle into something that's actually showing us something important. It becomes an object of insight. So, what can we do next? How do we actually make meditation happen? Well, we could check in on what our intentions are. So ask ourselves, why actually am I practicing? I mentioned a moment ago, maybe the values that get supported by our practicing meditation, whether that's well-being, whether it's relational qualities, our ability to be with others, whether it's prioritizing ourselves, maybe it's a time for connection, all sorts of possibilities about why you might want to practice meditation. So if you can actually have a clear sense of what these are, these intentions, that can be a supporting block. So maybe asking yourself, what is it that's important to me that meditation can support? And you might also want to kind of check in on some reading, perhaps on the evidence that mindfulness can help with these qualities. Maybe having a look at some of the scientific studies or some resumes of some of the scientific studies, reminding us of the areas in which meditation can be helpful, and connecting those with our own values. So in this, we're creating a kind of a ballast for the practice to happen, a sense of supporting intention by checking in on values and by reminding ourselves to trust the practice. Because unlike many things in the sort of everyday kind of world activities, there may not be an immediate benefit, an immediate payoff from. In fact, it might even be difficult. As a few people mentioned this, it can be difficult to practice, to be with ourselves. It might even be sometimes an unpleasant experience. So why would we give ourselves to an unpleasant experience unless there was a good reason? So having that sense of intention of what does this support can help us through that phase where we are thinking about meditation, but we never actually get to practice it. Kind of something else gets in the way. There's another priority. Something else is higher up the to-do list, or we put it higher up into the to-do list. Okay, so where are we? We've noticed the difficulties and we've taken them as our teacher. We've created an intention or connected with a sense of intention and trust in the practice. The next thing might be to actually physically set up an environment. So do you have a place, a specific place perhaps where meditation happens? Maybe you could actually set up that place to be somewhat important. Maybe it's got an object or something that reminds you of the values that you're supporting by going there. Maybe it's just having a chair, a specific chair or cushion or photograph or memento or flowers, something that draws you in. Because if your environment is not drawing you in, then it's going to be more difficult to get to it. So setting up the environment can be important, creating a space. Can you set up the inner environment too? A sense of actually prioritizing the time space. I often invite people on an 8-week mindfulness course at the beginning to actually see this as just as important as any other meeting that you would have. So you're going to have a meeting with yourself each day, and to prioritize that meeting in the same way that you would a meeting with somebody else that you value. And to keep that meeting. It wouldn't be good form to stand somebody else up, at short notice because something else came along, just any old thing. So do you stand yourself up on a regular basis? And if so, maybe you could actually recognize that you're as important as any other person that you're meeting with. Put it in the diary. If you have a busy diary, actually look, when is the time that I can create for this? Just like you would create the time for something else that was really important in your life. Okay, so that's kind of set up. And then we actually get to just doing it then. So to actually take that first step, it's sometimes said in yoga, the hardest move in yoga is getting yourself onto the mat. So in the same way, perhaps the hardest move in meditation is getting yourself to the meditation seat. And having connected with the intention, you just actually take that step forward. Just literally put your body there, as Sharon Salzberg sometimes says. And it helps to see this putting your body there as an experiment, an adventure maybe, rather than a chore. So if we're kind of expecting difficulty, or we are predicting difficulty, then it's going to seem much more like a chore. Whereas if we can see it as, well, I wonder what's going to happen this time. What am I going to discover? What am I going to learn? What encounters am I going to have? And there's that sense perhaps of cultivating an approach mode of moving towards, and both physically and mentally. So moving towards the seat that you've created. And then it's a case of repetition. So practicing that again and again and again, and remembering that the brain wires itself and rewires itself through repeated experience. The mind learns habits through repetition, through doing something again and again and again. every skill is learned through repeating, and in that repeating, the neurons in the brain fire and wire together until something becomes easier. And meditation is no different. So eventually it can become like cleaning your teeth. And the reason that we clean our teeth every day is because somebody somewhere has told us that that's important to do. And we've done it enough times that it becomes regular and repeated enough times so that it becomes a habit. And, mental hygiene just as important as dental hygiene. Feel free to use supports in the practice itself too. So, you may want to work with timers, actually having a time that you've created for this meeting and setting the timer and letting the clock actually tell you when the practice has ended rather than sort of just when the inclination comes. You may have guided audios that you like. So kind of having a sense of being guided through a practice, if that's helpful. And, you might even want to reward yourself after. So you said, okay, well, once I have given myself the space, then I am going to, reward myself with something that maybe that you need to do, or want to do. So it's, that being time is balanced with doing time. And the other thing I think is very important is to connect in with a group. You're already doing this because you're here. So meditation is not so great in the long term as a solo sport, because the very sense of having other people around us working with the same difficulties, taking the same plunges, a sense of common humanity, is often I often hear people say it's so much easier somehow to practice in a group than on my own. And if you find that, feel free to find a meditation buddy, buddy up with someone, especially if you know someone else who practices, and either practice together, or if that's not possible, speak to each other on the phone and check in how your practice is going. Send WhatsApp messages. There's loads and loads of kind of groups and Facebook pages where people support each other in meditation, including the one that I set up a little while ago, which you're very welcome to join. So mindful communities of various kinds can be very supportive. So one final kind of tip, and this is a really, really important one, is the process of meditation is that we revert to automatic pilot. It gets noticed somehow, almost by a process of magic. We find ourselves away from ourselves. We acknowledge that with a sense of non-judgment, and we come back. And that same process that we engage in meditation practice can be applied to the actual meta sense of the meditation practice itself, by which I mean sometimes we don't practice for a while, and then we notice we haven't practiced for a while. And so the task then is to do the same thing with our getting to meditation practice as we do in the meditation practice itself, which is to go, oh, look, how interesting. I haven't practiced for a while. I wonder what's happened there. And with a sense of complete self-forgiveness and love for ourselves, to come back, to actually take our body back to the sea, just like we take our minds back to an anchor in the meditation practice, so we can take our bodies back. And letting go as best we can of any inclinations to beat ourselves up for not having practiced, or somehow some sense of inadequacy, rather to celebrate that noticing and once again the desire. So then we can come back to the intention, back to the noticing of the obstacle and the learning from the obstacle. So we're actually back then at the beginning of the loop. So in a moment, I'm going to suggest that we go into a practice together to actually practice some of this communal meditating. But is there anything anybody would like to say or ask about anything that I've said so far?